I want you to close your eyes for a second, and just visualize something with me.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Imagine you are standing on the edge of this cliff, right? Looking down into a massive open dirt pit. And when I say massive, I mean picture a hole the size of a professional football stadium,
Wow.
just violently carved out of the earth. And inside this pit, there is absolutely no modern machinery, like none.
No bulldozers or anything.
No bulldozers idling. There are no cranes swinging overhead. There's not even a single piece of modern scaffolding. Instead, there is just this endless churning sea of wet mud.
It's hard to even imagine that in a modern context.
Right, and in that mud, moving like a giant colony of ants, there are 50,000 men.
50,000. I mean, it is a scale of human concentration that the modern brain almost just rejects.
Exactly.
When you see it, your instinct is to place it in the realm of, I don't know, ancient mythology. Like they're building the pyramids.
Which is exactly what it looks like. 50,000 men just covered head to toe in this thick gray earth. And they are silently carrying 60-kilogram sacks of dirt on their backs.
Up those ladders, right?
Yes, they are climbing up and down the steep, slick sides of this pit on these flimsy, creaking wooden ladders. They look like they could just splinter into 1,000 pieces at any given second.
It's terrifying just thinking about it.
It is nothing but pure, agonizing, raw human muscle power. Honestly, when you hear it described out loud, it sounds like a dispatch from a medieval slave camp, or maybe, a forgotten circle of Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, the visual is completely detached from what we consider the modern industrialized world. It really feels like a hallucination of the past.
But here is the truly wild part for you listening. This isn't a historical painting. It isn't a fictional nightmare. It is a real documented photograph.
Taken not that long ago, actually.
Exactly. It was taken in the mid-1980s at the Serra Pelada gold mine in Brazil. And the person who stood on the edge of that colossal pit and pressed the shutter on that camera is the subject of our deep dive today.
A truly fascinating figure.
He really is. We are exploring the life, the method, and the mind of the undisputed legend of modern documentary photography, the Brazilian photographer Sebastião Salgado.
He's just unparalleled.
He is. And using a stack of background articles and a really fascinating audio documentary as our source material, we are going to explore how this one man fundamentally shatters the way you and I see the world, how we see human labor and global inequality.
It's a heavy topic, but so necessary.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at his work, Salgado isn't just taking pictures, He is capturing the collective history of humanity in slow motion.
That's a great way to put it. And to understand how he achieves that monumental scale, we actually have to look at his beginnings.
Right, because he wasn't always a photographer.
Not at all. His journey is entirely unconventional for an artist of his stature. I mean, he did not grow up wandering around with a camera permanently attached to his neck, dreaming of being a photojournalist.
Yeah, you usually hear about these guys getting their first camera at age 5.
Exactly. But his background is deeply, rigidly rooted in numbers, data, and global systems. He was actually born in 1944 in the Brazilian state of Minas Gerais.
Okay.
And his initial path took him to the University of São Paulo, where he studied macroeconomics.
Which, I mean, on paper feels like the absolute furthest thing imaginable from standing in a muddy gold mine or shooting fine art photography.
Completely opposite worlds.
Right. You picture a guy in a suit with a chalkboard, not a guy in boots with a Leica.
The contrast is stark. And his trajectory only became more entrenched in that corporate academic world as time went on.
Because of the political situation in Brazil, right?
Yes. The political climate in Brazil became incredibly oppressive under the military dictatorship in the late 1960s. So Salgado and his wife, Lelio Salgado, were forced to flee to Europe.
That must have been terrifying.
It was. They settled in Paris and then eventually London. And he finished his doctorate in economics and ended up landing highly coveted top-tier positions.
Like really high-level stuff.
Oh, absolutely. We are talking about roles as a high-level economist working for organizations like the International Coffee Organization.
Wow.
Yeah, he was sitting in immaculate tailored suits in corporate offices in London and Paris, calculating global supply and demand curves, tracking inflation rates, and analyzing agricultural data.
And then comes this incredibly serendipitous turning point that the sources highlight.
That's my favorite part of the story.
Mine too. His wife, Lelia, who was studying architecture at the time, buys a camera for her coursework, just a tool for school.
Right.
Salgado picks it up, looks through the viewfinder, and the narrative just shifts entirely. The sources point out that the moment he looked through that lens, his worldview transformed from reading spreadsheets to reading light.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
It was such a profound revelation that by 1973, he makes an incredibly radical decision. He throws away a very secure, peaking corporate career as a global economist.
Just completely walks away from it.
Yeah. He leaves the comfortable, climate-controlled offices behind and decides he is going to be a photographer. He joins the Gamma agency in Paris and eventually becomes part of the legendary Magnum photos.
And for context on just how massive that leap is, Magnum Photos is essentially the Harvard or like the Navy SEALs of photojournalism.
It's the big leagues.
The biggest. It is an exclusive, invitation-only cooperative founded by pioneers like Henri Cartier-Bresson. Only the absolute best documentary photographers on Earth are admitted.
So it's not a joke.
No. To pivot from economics and just land in Magnum is staggering.
But here is my take on this, and I think this is the key to unlocking everything he does. I don't think Salgado actually abandoned his economics background at all.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
I think he just changed his lens. Think about it. An economist sitting in a high-rise in London knows that a 2-cent drop in global coffee prices is just a tiny microscopic statistic on a piece of paper.
Right. It's a blip on a line graph.
Exactly. But because Salgado understands macroeconomics fundamentally, he knows what that 2-cent drop actually means on the ground.
I see where you're going.
He knows it means an African farming family is going to starve that season because their crop is suddenly worthless.
Right, the real-world impact.
So instead of tracking the statistic in a ledger, Salgado went out and pointed his camera at the human sweat squeezed out by the invisible gears of that global economic system.
That is such a crucial insight. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that underlying economic foundation is the exact mechanism that separates him from the typical news photographer.
How so?
Well, the standard model for photojournalism is highly reactive and very fast. A photographer essentially parachutes into a crisis, a sudden war zone, a famine, or an earthquake.
Right, they fly in, take the pictures, and fly out.
Exactly. They snap the most dramatic, heartbreaking image they can capture in a few days, and then they leave. The news cycle moves on to the next disaster.
It's very fleeting.
But Salgado refuses to operate on that timeline. He doesn't shoot isolated, chaotic events. He shoots long-term global processes. He documents the structural shifts in human civilization.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because when you decide you are going to shoot global processes, you cannot just drop in for a long weekend.
No, absolutely not.
You can't capture the evolution of global labor or mass migration in a 3-day magazine assignment. So his method involves an unimaginable amount of time and logistical endurance. How is he actually pulling this off in the field?
The physical and temporal investment is staggering. We are talking about projects that take 10 years to complete.
10 years for one project.
Yes. He self-funds or structures these massive endeavors through book deals and gallery exhibitions later in his career. That frees him from the tight deadlines of editorial magazines.
That makes sense. So he's not rushing for a deadline.
Exactly. He spends months, sometimes years, living with the communities he's documenting. He eats the same food they eat. He sleeps in the same dirt or tents where they sleep.
He really embeds himself.
Fully. He gets sick with the same tropical illnesses they do, and he has to figure out how to protect delicate camera equipment from jungle humidity, desert sand, and absolute filth.
That alone sounds like a nightmare.
It is. But more importantly, this immersive approach completely shatters the cold, distant glass wall that usually exists between the photographer and the subject.
Because he's not an outsider looking in anymore.
Precisely. When you spend that much time sweating and suffering alongside someone, they stop being a mere object of pity for the camera.
Right, they become real people to the lens.
They become dignified narrators of their own lives.
Yeah.
The trust becomes palpable in the final image.
You can feel that trust deeply, especially when you look at the sheer overwhelming scale of his work. He is famous for these massive, decades-long projects.
Grand trilogies.
Yeah, the sources really focus on 3 monumental series that essentially form a complete panorama of the human experience. Let's really look at each of these, starting with Workers, which began in the 1980s.
Ah, yes.
This is the project that the Cerro Pelado gold mine photo belongs to, right?
That's right. Workers is a globe-spanning documentation of manual labor at the end of the industrial age. He traveled to dozens of countries to photograph the nameless heroes who literally built the world with their muscles.
The people doing the hardest jobs on Earth.
Exactly. We see shipbreakers in Bangladesh, dismantling massive oil tankers by hand, coal miners in India, and of course those gold miners in Brazil.
It really is unbelievable to look at.
It ties directly back to your point about economics.
Mhm.
Salgado is showing us the absolute bottom rung of the global supply chain.
The invisible workforce.
Yes, these are the people creating the immense wealth of the modern world who will never, ever see a fraction of it.
And then, as the Berlin Wall fell and the world shifted into the 1990s, he transitioned into his next massive undertaking: migrations.
A very dark period.
It was a period of immense, violent global upheaval. Wars, economic collapses, and early climate disasters were forcing millions of people out of their homes.
The visual scale of migrations is haunting. He documented massive, heartbreaking global displacements.
What kind of places did he go to for this?
He shows us the sprawling, endless refugee camps in Rwanda and Zaire, where the sheer volume of humanity stretches out to the horizon.
Just oceans of people.
Yes. We see families fleeing the brutal wars in the Balkans, carrying everything they own on their backs. It is the invisible collateral damage of the global systems he used to study laid bare for the world to see.
It's hard to even process that level of displacement.
He captures the sensation of millions of people suddenly becoming unmoored from the earth.
And then, after spending literally decades soaking up the absolute darkest, most painful parts of humanity, war, starvation, brutal labor, genocide, he does something totally unexpected in the 2000s.
The total shift.
He pivots completely. He launches Genesis, he turns his camera entirely away from human destruction and focuses on untouched nature.
A search for origins, really.
Right. The Amazon rainforest, the glaciers of Antarctica, the vast deserts of Africa, these fragile, ancient ecosystems that humans haven't managed to destroy yet.
The physical toll of Genesis was immense, by the way. He was hiking into the deepest parts of the Amazon to photograph uncontacted tribes.
Oh, wow.
Enduring freezing temperatures to capture penguins on ice caps and navigating just extreme terrains. What's fascinating here is how these three projects, Workers, Migrations, and Genesis, function together as a grand trilogy.
They really cover the whole spectrum.
They do. They show humanity's constructive power, our destructive power, and finally, the pristine world we are constantly interacting with.
But through all of these wildly different subjects, from a dusty refugee camp to a shimmering icy glacier, there is one unyielding constant in his work.
Yes, his signature style.
His absolute refusal to shoot in color.
He uses black and white photography almost dogmatically.
And I have to be honest with you, when I first looked at the Genesis project, I was genuinely frustrated.
Really.
I mean, you are in the Amazon rainforest. There are literally 1,000 vibrating shades of green. There are brightly colored macaws. The sky is this piercing blue, and you strip all of that away.
I can see why that would feel counterintuitive.
You shoot the most vibrant place on Earth in grayscale. At first glance, I felt like it was almost an insult to nature's vibrancy. Why on earth would he handicap himself like that?
It is a very common reaction because we are so conditioned to associate nature and reality with vivid color. But Salgado's visual language relies entirely on rejecting that expectation.
Okay, walk me through that.
Think about how the human brain processes an image. Color is, in many ways, visual noise.
Noise.
Yes, if you are looking at a deeply moving, emotionally complex photograph of a desperate refugee mother holding her child, but there happens to be a bright, shiny red plastic bucket in the corner of the frame,
Oh, I see.
where someone in the background is wearing a neon yellow t-shirt, your eye is naturally, biologically drawn to those bright colors. It distracts your brain from the core emotion of the scene.
It dilutes the human impact because I'm busy looking at a plastic bucket.
Precisely. By stripping away the color, Salgado removes the excess, distracting details of reality. He abstracts the image, which instantly makes it feel timeless.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
When you look at his black and white photos, the incredibly deep contrasts and the dramatic manipulation of shadow and light give the subjects this almost sculptural quality.
They do look like statues sometimes.
Imagine a black and white photo where the light hits a Brazilian miner's mud-caked shoulder, making it look like a carved marble statue. It's why art critics constantly compare his photographs to classic Baroque paintings.
Like Caravaggio or something.
Exactly. The sweeping compositions, the interplay of shadow, and that divine-looking light, it elevates a gritty, horrific scene into something mythic and monumental.
But that elevation leads us right into the most intense part of our deep dive. Because making human suffering look like a flawless, museum-quality Baroque painting naturally triggers one of the most unsolvable ethical debates in all of documentary art.
It's a massive point of contention.
And I felt it myself. When I was looking through the workers and migrations photos, I genuinely felt a wave of guilt.
Guilt for appreciating the art.
Yes. I caught myself thinking, how can I be sitting here in my comfortable chair, sipping my coffee, admiring the absolutely flawless poetic lighting on a man's face when this man is clearly experiencing unimaginable agony?
It is a profound discomfort. And you're not alone in feeling that. The sources we're analyzing highlight a very famous critique of Salgado's work, most notably championed by the writer and cultural critic Susan Sontag.
Right, Sontag had very strong feelings about this,
She did. She argued very forcefully against what she called the aestheticization of poverty.
making poverty look pretty.
Exactly. Her critique was that when you make suffering look beautiful, you inevitably romanticize it. You strip away the raw, ugly political reality of the situation and replace it with an art object.
Right, the danger Sontag is pointing out is that the sheer beauty of the photograph lightens the crushing weight of the truth.
It creates a buffer.
Yeah, an audience will look at a starving child, beautifully lit in a sweeping, majestic composition, and instead of feeling a visceral call to action or demanding political change, they will simply say, wow, what a magnificent composition.
Which completely defeats the purpose of documenting it.
Exactly. Their conscience is essentially cleared by the aesthetic experience. They buy the coffee table book, and they move on without ever engaging with the actual social crisis.
That is the core of the critique. The beauty becomes a buffer between the viewer and the pain.
I hear that, and to be clear to you listening, we are exploring both sides of this debate without taking a definitive stance because both arguments hold incredible weight.
Absolutely, we aren't picking sides here.
But I find myself really grappling with Sontag's critique because isn't that an incredible catch-22 for Salgado?
How do you mean?
If he goes into a refugee camp and takes a blurry, ugly, poorly composed photo of suffering, I'm swiping past it. I'm ignoring it entirely because it's unpleasant to look at.
Human nature.
But because he uses his mastery of light to make it look like a Rembrandt, he gets accused of romanticizing tragedy.
It's a very tough position for an artist to be in.
Salgado's defense against this is vital. He argues that beauty is an absolutely necessary hook. We live in a modern world where we are drowning in billions of disposable, graphic, gritty images.
We see them every day on our phones.
Right. If you just show mundane, raw pain, people instinctively look away. It's too much. His perspective is that the monumental beauty of his photographs is the only weapon he has that forces the viewer to stop.
To actually pay attention.
Yes, to look closer and to finally bear witness to the invisible people who power our world. He uses beauty as a trap to make you look at things you desperately want to ignore.
It raises a fundamental question about the role of the artist. Is your responsibility merely to document the ugliness? Or do you have a duty to package that reality in a way that demands sustained attention?
It's a really deep question.
What becomes incredibly clear in the sources, however, is that Salgado himself felt the massive crushing weight of this ethical burden.
It must have weighed on him heavily.
After decades of witnessing war, genocide, and endless environmental destruction, Salgado was physically and spiritually exhausted. He didn't just want to be a guy who extracted gorgeous images of suffering from the developing world and left them hanging on the pristine white walls of fancy art galleries in Paris and New York.
He felt like he had to do more.
He needed to do something tangible.
And that leads directly to what I think is the most awe-inspiring part of this entire deep dive. It's the story of Instituto Terra.
A beautiful chapter in his life.
It moves completely beyond the camera lens. Salgado and his wife, Lelia, returned to the land where he grew up in the Atlantic forest of Brazil. But the lush, vibrant paradise he remembered from his childhood was completely gone.
Just devastated.
Yeah, due to aggressive farming and deforestation, it had become a dead, barren, dusty dirtscape.
It was an ecological graveyard. The rivers had entirely dried up, the topsoil was eroded, and the wildlife had completely vanished.
That's heartbreaking.
It was a physical mirror of the destruction and despair he had been photographing globally for years.
But instead of just taking out his camera, shooting some dramatic black and white photos of the dead landscape, and publishing another book about the end of the world, he and Lelia decided to take physical action.
They didn't just document the death.
No, they decided to replant the forest. And they didn't just plant a small memorial garden. Over the years, organizing massive community efforts and raising funds, they planted millions and millions of trees.
Millions. It's hard to fathom.
They literally brought an entire dead ecosystem back from the grave.
The magnitude of Instituto Terra cannot be overstated.
Hmm.
By painstakingly replanting those millions of native trees, The root systems actually held the soil together again.
Oh,
The
wow.
water cycles actually returned to the region.
Mm.
The microclimate stabilized.
Mm.
And incredibly, the wildlife came back.
Really? Like the original animals?
Yes. Jaguars, rare birds,
Yeah.
insect species that hadn't been seen in that specific region for decades migrated back to the new forest.
That is just incredible.
It is a literal physical manifestation of the core themes he explored in his photography. He spent his life documenting humanity's terrifying, boundless, destructive power. But with Instituto Terra, he proved our equal capacity for harmony, restoration, and rebirth.
So as we pull all of these threads together, I want you to think about the sharp contrast between Salgado's methodology and the way we interact with the world today.
It's night and day.
Right. Salgado will spend 10 years of his life sleeping in tents, hiking up mountains, contracting fevers, and living in refugee camps just to truly understand and convey a single complex human story.
A decade for one narrative.
Meanwhile, you and I consume thousands of images every single day. We swipe past entire human lives, entire global tragedies, with our thumbs in a fraction of a second on our glowing screens.
What's fascinating here is that Salgado's entire legacy is a masterclass in resistance. He is actively resisting the fast, disposable, hyper-colored culture of modern media.
He's forcing us to slow down.
He is demanding that we trust the slow, deep process of true storytelling. His work, both his photography and his activism, proves that understanding the world requires immense patience, extreme proximity, and a willingness to look deeply at both the darkness and the light.
It really is a wake-up call. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a completely different thought to mull over today, building on everything we've discussed.
Oh, I'm curious.
We often use the state of the world as an excuse to disengage. But think about Sebastião Salgado. If a man who stood on the front lines of the Rwandan genocide, who spent decades photographing starvation, exploitation, and the absolute worst horrors humanity has to offer.
The darkest parts of our species.
Exactly. If that man can return home, look at a dead, barren wasteland, and decide to spend the rest of his life physically replanting a forest with his own hands, what is our excuse for cynicism?
It's a powerful reminder that witnessing the worst of the world doesn't have to break you. It can actually be the exact catalyst you need to start rebuilding it.
And to add one final question for you to ponder, if the entire purpose of documentary photography is to bear witness, does our modern habit of scrolling past tragedies in half a second mean we are actually bearing witness?
Or are we just looking?
Right. Or has the sheer speed of our media consumption made us entirely blind to the world we actually live in?
That's a thought that will stick with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life and lens of Sebastião Salgado. We warmly invite you to return for our next exploration. Until then, take a little more time to really look at the world around you.